My brother took credit for my work while I paid family debts and stayed silent, so I exposed proof, took promotion and let them regret. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I was labeled the responsible one in my family, while my older brother was treated like the future success story everyone was waiting on. From the outside, it probably looked harmless, just different personalities. But inside the house, that label shaped everything about me. My parents leaned on me in ways they never did with him. Whenever something went wrong, I'd hear the same line, "You're strong. You can handle it." When my mom was stressed, she vented to me. When my dad was overwhelmed, he came to me for advice. I was still in my early 20s, but somehow I was the emotional anchor of the family. Money followed the same pattern. I quietly paid household bills when things got tight. I covered loan payments when deadlines passed. I handled emergencies that somehow kept happening. I never announced it. I just transferred the money and moved on, telling myself this was temporary. My brother, on the other hand, was always finding himself. Every half-formed idea he had was praised as ambition. Every failure was framed as potential. At dinner, my parents would smile and say things like, "He's going to do something big one day." When I stayed late at work or skipped plans to help out, no one commented. It was just expected. Sometimes I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask why my effort felt invisible while his intentions were celebrated. But every time I opened my mouth, guilt shut it again. Family was supposed to come first. Sacrifice was supposed to mean something. So I stayed quiet. I told myself loyalty mattered more than recognition. That being dependable was its own reward. That eventually, someone would notice how much I carried. At that point, I truly believed silence and sacrifice were the price of belonging, and that one day, all of it would finally be worth it. It didn't happen all at once. It started small, almost reasonable. A missed utility payment here. A loan reminder there. My parents would call me late at night, voices tight with stress, and say things like, "We're just short this month," or "It's temporary, we'll fix it." And every time, I stepped in without hesitation. I began covering bills quietly, transferring money before things got shut off. I paid loan installments my parents forgot about. I handled surprise expenses that somehow always became emergencies. No one ever sat me down to ask. It was implied. I was the reliable one. I'd figure it out. To afford it, I worked overtime. I skipped trips with friends. I stopped upgrading anything in my own life. My savings account became a revolving door, money in, money straight back out. I told myself this was what adulthood looked like. Responsibility. Sacrifice. My brother knew what was happening. He'd clap me on the shoulder and say, "I really appreciate you, man. I swear, once things click for me, I'll make it up to you." He said it casually, like a promise that didn't need a timeline. My parents echoed it differently, "This is what family does." That sentence became their shield. Any doubt I felt died right there. At dinner, they still talked about my brother's future. New ideas. New plans. New potential. When I mentioned being tired or stressed, my mom would frown and say, "You've always been strong. You'll be fine." That was it. No follow-up. No thank you. I remember standing in my childhood kitchen one night, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my dad panic about another bill. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and the room smelled faintly of cold coffee. As I sent the money, something in my chest tightened, but I ignored it. By then, I wasn't just helping anymore. I had become the safety net everyone assumed would always be there. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to stop. Work slowly turned into the only place where my effort felt real. At home, sacrifice blurred into obligation, but at the office, results still meant something. If I stayed late, things got done. If I solved a problem, it stayed solved. There was a strange comfort in that kind of logic. I started taking on the projects no one wanted. The messy ones. The ones with tight deadlines and unclear instructions. I'd sit at my desk long after the office emptied, the hum of the air conditioner filling the silence while city lights flickered through the windows. I told myself the exhaustion was worth it because at least here, my work didn't disappear. My manager noticed. Not loudly, not publicly, but in small ways. A nod during meetings. A quiet, "Good job handling that," as we passed in the hallway. It wasn't praise exactly, but it felt earned. For the first time in a while, I felt steady. I never bragged about what I did. I wasn't wired that way. I believed consistency spoke louder than confidence. If you kept delivering, people would see it eventually. That belief had been drilled into me at home, and I carried it into my career without questioning it. That's when my brother started asking about my job. At first, it was casual. "So what do you actually do all day, or how does that system work?" I answered without thinking, explaining processes, walking him through concepts over dinner. He listened closely, nodding like he was just curious. Then the questions got more specific. What do managers usually look for? How do you present ideas so they sound impressive? What projects matter most? I brushed off the unease creeping in. He was my brother. Of course I'd help him. Helping was what I did. Still, there were moments, late at night, staring at my laptop, when something didn't sit right. A feeling that I was giving away pieces of something I'd built just to survive. I ignored it, like I always did. I had no idea that work, the one place I felt safe, was about to become just another battlefield. When my brother told me he was applying to my company, my stomach dropped before I could stop it. He tried to sound casual about it, shrugging as he said, "You already know how things work there. It just makes sense." My parents were thrilled. They acted like this was fate lining things up perfectly. I helped him prepare. I reviewed his resume, rewrote sections he didn't understand, and coached him through interview questions late at night while the house was quiet. The glow from my laptop lit the room as he nodded along, repeating my words back to me until they sounded like his own. When he got the offer, my parents hugged him like he'd already won something big. At work, he came in confident, charming, and loud in all the ways I wasn't. He introduced himself to everyone, laughed easily in meetings, and spoke with certainty even when he didn't fully understand what he was saying. Behind the scenes, though, he leaned on me constantly. "Can you check this real quick? Does this make sense? How would you approach this?" I fixed his mistakes quietly. I rewrote his reports. I explained problems he pretended to already know. I told myself it was temporary, that he just needed time to adjust. Soon, people started grouping us together. "You two work well as a team," someone joked once. I forced a smile, even though something twisted in my chest. The imbalance was obvious to me, but invisible to everyone else. My brother started speaking up more in meetings, confidently summarizing ideas I'd shared with him in private. He never mentioned where they came from. When I stayed silent, no one questioned it. One afternoon, as I watched him present something I'd spent weeks developing, our manager nodded in approval. The room buzzed with polite interest, and I felt myself shrinking into my chair. I told myself I was overthinking it. That this was just how collaboration worked. But a quiet thought wouldn't leave me alone: if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice what I'd actually been doing? The shift was subtle at first, almost polite. In meetings, our manager stopped saying, "Good work on this," and started saying, "Great team effort." Then it became, "I like how you led this," while looking directly at my brother. I remember sitting there, pen frozen in my hand, wondering if I'd misheard. Ideas I had spent nights refining would come up again minutes later, this time coming from my brother's mouth. He'd lean forward confidently and say, "What we should do is," and repeat my exact solution with just enough polish to sound impressive. Heads would nod. Someone would smile. No one looked at me. I told myself it wasn't worth correcting. Causing tension at work felt dangerous. At home, conflict was always remembered, never forgiven. Silence had kept the peace for years, why would this be any different? That's when my parents started bragging. At family dinners, my mom would beam and say, "Your brother is really stepping up at work." My dad would add, "He's a natural leader. You can just tell." They said it proudly, like they were finally being proven right. I sat there, chewing my food slowly, feeling something sour spread through my chest. Once, I tried to gently mention that we worked closely together. My mom waved it off. "You've always liked helping. He's the one with vision." The words landed harder than she probably intended. At work, the distance between effort and recognition kept growing. I stayed late fixing issues tied to projects my brother's name was now attached to. The office smelled like stale coffee and printer toner as I watched my own work circulate without me. I started questioning myself. Maybe I wasn't assertive enough. Maybe I didn't look like leadership. Maybe this was just how things worked if you weren't loud. But deep down, a different realization began to form, one that made my stomach churn. This wasn't accidental. This wasn't teamwork. Something was being taken from me, piece by piece, right in front of everyone, and I was letting it happen.